Okay, hello and welcome to the Happily Different podcast, where we unpack the interesting and unorthodox ways people approach their businesses and their lives. The mission of this show is to learn as much as we can from people who aren't afraid to go their own way. My name is Ryan Jaskowitz, and I'm your host, as well as CEO of 12.5 Capital, a non-bank finance company helping companies accelerate the progress they are trying to make in their businesses and their lives. Today's guest is the founder and CEO of LowCode Agency, which is a no-code/low-code software developer with a team of people helping businesses start, grow, and scale their businesses without breaking the bank. Our guest has helped many companies leverage their technology for quite a while now. In addition to LowCode, he is the founder of Solar Panel Cancun, which is a solar panel installation company working in the Mexican Caribbean area. Jesus Vargas, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, full disclosure, I am a client of LowCode, or I shouldn't say I am. 12.5 Capital is a client of LowCode, so we love everything they do and are excited to have you on board. So thank you for coming on our inaugural trip here on the podcast world.
I feel honored. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you feeling honored to be on the 10 millionth podcast ever to be recorded, ever. Better late than never, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Better late than never. All right. So I feel like it's easier just to jump right in. So in doing some research on you, it looks like, and by research, I mean, you're not all over Wikipedia. So it's focused pretty much on your LinkedIn, whatever Google
right.
scrounged up. It looks like your first job was with a company called Printiform. What kind of company was that, and how'd you get started in that space?
Printiform is a paper-related company. It made these before spreadsheets were printed on paper, right? And this company made those, or actually printed those paper forms for businesses, for accountants, right? So it's a 50, almost 60-year-old company. You still can find those type of paper forms in Office Depot or Staples, actually, if you look at the bottom of some place.
Somewhere, some discount
this paperwork. Yeah, probably, exactly. Multiple paper formats for business owners and managers and accountants to manage their business, right? When I was in college, it's a family-owned business, which was founded and owned by my grandfather on my mother's side. Right?
So Printiform is a family business.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And then they started making these paper forms, and eventually they grew. They started importing calculators to Mexico, and then they started making computers. And it was one of the largest computer factories in the world. It was one of the 50 largest companies in Mexico. And it has the largest deal with Microsoft. It was the only company that was allowed to install Microsoft into computers in Mexico. So it was a huge company in the late 80s, early 90s.
And when did you start with them?
I started working there 2005 or 6 or 7, when I was in college. By that time, there were no longer computers. They were no longer making computers. It was a much more smaller business than what it had been 20 years ago, right? Struggling, still making paper forms and trying to find what to do, right? So we were still importing over 300 containers per year from Asia mainly, computer accessories and furniture, desks for computers and office chairs and all that, like a furniture line. So I started working in the international purchasing department, managing logistics mainly. That's how I started. I worked there for many years, like 12 years, I think. I ended up managing a lot of different parts of the operation.
Yeah, I'm glad I asked about that, because my next question was what your parents did for a living. And while this wasn't your parents, did your parents work in this organization? You said it was started by your grandfather on your mother's side, right?
Yeah, my mom did. It was a very, I don't want to say strange, but it was a very unique relationship with my grandfather, because he was always my boss and never my grandfather, right? And I might be exaggerating a little bit, but there was the relationship was very professional. I was the only grandson out of 20 something working at the company. So yeah, my mom worked there. My dad didn't. I mean, he actually works in the horse industry, training horses and horse riders.
Oh, wow. Talk about completely different from that.
Yeah. Yeah, completely different. So unrelated completely to technology or paper or anything. So yeah, my dad has his own way. My grandfather passed away last year at 92, I guess. And now it's my mom and her brothers and sisters who manage the company. I mean, when I was there, I was involved in transforming the company and finding new business opportunities in the same business line as it had started and grown. So we started doing labels and all this. When you go to the supermarket and you get a like huge paper ticket with your receipt or anything, we started making those for Walmart. I mean, we started transforming the business, and now I mean it's a much smaller business than what it was in the 90s, but it's still a good business that helps my mom and her siblings to live, you know. But at the same time, I had always that struggle with my grandfather because I was like, hey, I started very young, probably when I was 19.
Okay.
And then I started growing, and then I started as an assistant in the international purchasing department, and I ended up managing sales, the purchasing department, both national and international. I closed some of the biggest clients. I started this thing of buying machinery. We spent like $20 million buying new machinery to do new things around paper forms. So I was like, hey, I've been growing within the company. Help me. Like, I need to make more, right? And that was always a struggle. And he was very reluctant to do that. And then at the end, I had to leave. I couldn't stay there. There was not a path. There was not a clear path for me.
Why do you think there was that reluctance? Is it just a generational thing? What do you think that reluctance was to sort of not necessarily give you the reins, but, you know, give you more responsibility? Because clearly it seems like you had shown that you're the only grandchild who decided to get into the business, which in and of itself is a very different thing. You would think with a business of that size, usually all the grandkids or family members are trying to get a piece of the pie, but you were the one that actually sort of made it in there. So what was that reluctance on his part, you think?
I mean, on one end, he was just like that with everyone, right? He liked people being dependent on him. So, and that happened even with his children, right? Even the children of his that worked at the company, they always had to ask their father for a loan to buy a car because the company didn't pay them well enough, right? So he was always a helper in his surroundings, right? And I was like, hey, you've helped your children, you loan them all money to buy a house, right? But that won't happen with me or with all the other 20 grandchildren that you have, right? I need to make my own way. Eventually, I'll need to buy my house. I'll need to buy a car. I'll have to get married. And I can't make it with this salary. And I'm going to ask you every time I have to do something or I want to grow, like in my personal life, I can't be dependent on your goodwill to do that. On top of that, my responsibilities at the company were very, I don't know, I was doing a lot of things. And I always told him, hey, I like this business more than any one of your kids. And I was very involved. And I even spoke with them and I was like, hey, eventually when your father is not around, who's going to take over? You want to take over when you're 60 something? And all of them were like, probably not. And I was like, I want to take over and not the owner or anything. I love this business. I really loved it. I mean, it was my favorite job in my whole life, those 12 years. So I wanted to take over, like help them take the company to the next step and everything. Didn't work out. Then I had to leave and I left.
When did you leave? What year was that?
I left probably 2015. Then I kind of came back a couple of years. Yeah, just just before getting married. I was like, this is not going to work out.
Okay.
I'm getting married. I need to buy a house. I need to do something. And I was like, I spoke with him one last time. He was like, no, it's not going to happen. And then I left.
Yeah. Yeah. That's sort of that seminal moment when you're getting married, starting a family. All these things are rolling through your head and running through your head. And all of a sudden you got to make bigger decisions on where you want the trajectory of your life to go. I don't want to make you paint with a broad brush here, but is that only because I have an experience with a client where everything you're talking about sounds exactly the same. My client is supposedly the CEO of a large organization, but the whole family has to go to the grandfather who started the business for anything, any decision making, any spending of money, anything like that. And I'm just curious if that is a common Latin America thing. They're out of a Latin American country. Just curious if that's that, or maybe I'm just taking an N of two and combining those things together.
No, I would say it's pretty common. It's pretty common. Actually, it's very uncommon. And that company, we had some clients that went the other route. Right? They had a very institutional board. It's a family business, but they're very institutional, and it has worked out great for them. But I mean, everybody knows, right? That businesses, it's very hard for businesses to pass to the next generation. Like most businesses don't make it, but probably that's a very Latin American thing or even a Mexican thing. I don't know.
Yeah. Usually in the U.S., this is painting with a broad brush right here. Usually in the U.S., when you pass it to the second and third generations, they screw up the companies. So maybe Latin America's smart and they're looking north, saying we don't want to do that.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, it was his experience. There was when the NAFTA started, 92, 93 probably. Some businesses, like there was a huge retail company, the paper industry, office supplies, that was sold to Office Depot and another big one to Office Max, right? And then his kids ended up with a bunch of money, and the owners were friends with my grandfather. And then their kids had a bunch of money. They started a bunch of businesses and they didn't make it. So he was always worried that if he gave his kids the power to either manage the company or enough money to start their own business, they wouldn't make it. And I also think that he really didn't want anyone else to make it better than what he did. Like his legacy was his company.
I see.
And the company
a little bit of both.
Yeah, that's my feeling.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying. So there's a little bit of the fearfulness of, if he gives the money and supports the family in starting their own businesses, those things may fail because obviously, he's had a lot of success and doesn't think anybody can do it as well. But I'm sure there's on the other side, like you just said, that idea that what if whatever they make is better than whatever I did.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, thanks for sharing that. So speaking of Latin America, did you grow up your entire life in Mexico or anywhere else?
Yes. Yeah, Mexico City. Mm-hmm.
Mexico City. So it's always been Mexico City. Interesting. So you shift from Printiform to, I think there were a couple other businesses there, but did you pretty quickly thereafter sort of start your own businesses after leaving Printiform?
Actually, even when I was in Printiform, I started, I don't know the year, but I started a business which was an e-commerce for office supplies, right? Because I had them right there. So I was like, let's add just some other things that we don't have for Printiform, and let's have an e-commerce. And that failed. I mean, I started a lot of businesses that have failed. I was going over my Dropbox the other day, and I found so many business cards that I've made, right? So, I mean, they're not even on LinkedIn, so I don't even remember. But I always started like a side hustle or a side business, even when working, right? But no, I went over different industries, different jobs, always trying to do something around the digital world, right? I started doing websites, a little bit of automation somewhere, but always working a 9-to-5 job. And then I started my business way later, like 3 or 4 years ago, actually, like full time.
Right. Well, what's just one interesting thing I'd like to pull a thread on here is what's the difference between someone like me starting a business here in the US where I have every, maybe I don't think so when I'm starting it, but really compared to other countries, I have every resource available to me, right? when you look back at the chances and the opportunities that I had compared to other countries, it's pretty incredible. Like that's what makes the United States great in many ways. So what's the difference, in your words, what's the difference between me starting a business here and someone like you starting in Mexico, trying to get it off the ground? Is there a benefit to other countries, maybe with lack of regulations? Are things harder for you? Any thoughts on that?
I would say that overall, I mean, right now, LowCode, my business, is a US business, right? So based on my experience, starting a business in Mexico is way harder than in the States. First, the size of the economy, right? I think that the size of the Mexican economy is probably smaller than the size of the California economy, right? So just to start, you're I don't know, there's a handicap. And then the Mexican economy is very off the grid, right? Nobody likes paying taxes. Everybody avoids paying taxes as much as possible. So it's also hard if you want to like start a proper business. It'll be very hard. I mean, taxes are massive. The accounting system is very complicated. I mean, in the States, the taxing system is also complicated, but I think the economy is something that doesn't help. And there's also this feeling, and I was speaking recently with another founder, very successful from Venezuela, and he moved to Miami. We were talking about this. I feel that there's certain jealousy or envy in Latin America in general when you start a business. Like people don't support you. And I've seen just the opposite in the States.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. In the States, people, they let's say they might not buy from you. They're like, hey, like, good luck. I mean, this is going to work out great for you. And over here, it's usually the opposite. It's like, isn't that like a very complicated market? Are you sure it's going to work out? Like, so there's not this, I don't know, feeling of support that you have in the States. And I've seen that with a lot of founders, like starting their business, making their app, and everybody like, this is a great idea. I'm going to help you. I know someone. I'll put you in touch with this person because they're the same industry that you're trying to get into. And it's just the opposite over here. So yeah.
Interesting. I wonder, that's a really interesting thought. I wonder if it comes from a place of, why you? Why do you get to be the one that starts a business and not me? Do you know what I mean? Like a bit of a jealousy and envy thing, but also a bit of, hey, we come from the same place, which isn't the easiest upbringing ever, right? Like, I wonder if there's a part of that that's sort of like, why do you get to be the person that starts a business? And so instead of supporting you, I'm gonna tear down.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't know. I just know that it's hard. And there aren't the resources. I also see that in the States, I mean, everybody, and I see that very much today with LowCode, everybody wants to start their side business. So it's an economy and it's a country that the hustle is something that everybody enjoys and applauds and cheers on. Right? Hustle, and you have your 9 to 5, and you have a side hustle, and then you have an e-commerce, and then you have a Shopify, and you're selling on Amazon, right? And everybody's like, yeah, that's great. Make a few more dollars. Just the opposite happens in Europe, right? Europe is like 9 to 5, I'm done. Fridays, 9 to 3, let's have beers. And then over here, the economy is like, it's something in our blood, I think. But there's just not enough resources also to start. I see a lot of companies in the US or startups or let's say even founders, entrepreneurs who have these resources like at school, right? So they have like a business accelerator at the school and they bring in mentors and the mentors help them and just like talk about their ideas, right? And that doesn't happen over here either.
Well, think about that. Think about just that little, like as you describe that to me, I think about when I mentioned the opportunities we have, like just the fact that exists for almost anybody in the US to be a part of if they choose to, right? There's an accelerator in every city now. There's the ability to enter markets in a way that the digital marketing, not marketing, but the digital revolution has allowed people to start businesses almost anywhere, in any place, at any time. And, in America, in the United States, we have a lot of security blankets although there's a lot of people in our country who are suffering really, really badly, I think if you look at Mexico, it's quite a bit different, right? So I appreciate you giving that feedback on sort of the differences to starting that business. So can we touch a little bit on the solar installation company? Because that came before LowCode, right? I mean, so was that the first legitimate, full-fledged, I don't want to say legitimate because they're all legitimate. They just fail for one reason or another. And like I said, I also have all those business cards, and I'm sure I'll have future ones as well. What got you into that solar installation space? Like that seems very different than printed forms, right? Yeah. So like that seems very different to me. So can you talk a little bit about that and how that got started and all that jazz?
It's a good story. So I was working for a company in Cancun that built a fiber optics network from Cancun to Tulum, right? So I was hired as a pre-sales person because the network wasn't built yet. So we were pre-selling, me and another guy from the States, we were pre-selling to large businesses, hotels mainly, right? Eventually the network was ready, and then the founders who are actually in Chicago in the US, they started hiring more people. And they eventually found a guy who was supposed to be the PR guy because he knew a lot of people in Cancun. And he figured out a way to become the head of sales or the manager. I don't remember the name, right? He was above me and the other salesperson. And he came from selling timeshares, right? So very different industry, very different market. You know how timeshares are like very pushy. Like he was one of those guys, right? He was the guy. He was very famous within the timeshare industry. He had been doing that for many years. So they hired this guy, and this guy comes to the office with no knowledge about technology, fiber optics, gigabytes, whatever. And he was like, we are going to change how we work here. So in a few weeks, your salaries will be gone. It'll be a commission-based only system. We were like, dude, this is not how this works. I understand that's how it works with the timeshare industry because you get new leads, new people coming in every day. But here we're selling like a couple $1 million contracts, 5-year, 10-year long contracts. So you can't survive now, at least now, with commissions only. And I was like, I'm the boss. That's how it works. If you don't like it, you can leave. And I was like, well, if that's how it's going to work, when you're going to implement that, I'm leaving. I'll give you one month and then I'm gone. And then he didn't do that right away, but he did that like 3 or 4 months later. He was like, okay, we'll start with this new thing of working here. And I was like, well, I'm done. I'm not going to work that way. So I left, and then I didn't know what I was going to do. And then my mother's husband is an electrical engineer, and he lives in Guadalajara in the west of Mexico, and he was doing great with the solar panels. So he was like, he called me one day and he was like, hey, I'm doing great. This is not that complicated. I know that you're not an engineer, but I'll teach you. You're very good at selling, and you're very good at understanding things. So you'll get the gist out of this thing, right? So that's what I did. Like I started, I think I went over a week or so with him to see how things, I had no idea about anything. I just barely know how to plug my lab to the thing, right? So I took a crash course, not even in electrical engineering, but in solar panel installation. And then he was like, well, no, go back, sell. And then when you sell something, I'll come and I'll help you. And that's what I did. I sold an installation at a home of someone, like a friend of a friend. And then I was like, what's next? Then, I don't know, I bought the panels, the kit, and whatever. He came over, we hired some guys, we installed it, and I did the paperwork with the energy company. That was the first one. And then the second one, and then the third, and then I hired a little team, and then that's how it started.
That is awesome. I love that story. Because candidly, I've told you before, I love solar panels on my house. I love the renewable energy industry. If I could start a business, it would be a different business than I'm in now. It would probably be that space. So it's just interesting to me to hear how you started that. So like when you say crash course, you literally flew to or however you get to Guadalajara. And when you say crash course, it wasn't an actual course. It was with him for a week. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, looking at things like,
right. And so you guys went on sales calls and what sort of like little things were you doing?
no, I mean, just me. Like, I mean, there was a trade show at that same time. So actually, I hadn't quit yet or been fired or whatever we call that thing. So my mom was like, I'm going to pay your ticket for you to fly to Mexico this weekend because there's a trade show, like a solar or renewable energy trade show. Arturo, her husband, will go also to Mexico City. You'll meet with him, and he'll introduce you to the providers that sell the equipment and all of that. So yeah, like 1 week, and I was like, okay, let's start selling. So I know I did my little flyers and I did my cards and my Facebook page and started reaching out to friends and people. And so when I got a electrical bill from this lady, I called this guy, hey, I got this. What's next? Okay, so go to this website and let's set up an account.
So you went bill first. Yeah. Okay.
So we did the calculation. So you need this many panels.
Interesting.
We have 8 panels in that house. You need 8 panels, whatever. So we made up the proposal, sent it over. And then this girl, she was like, I have 3 proposals. Yours is not the cheapest, but I like you. I trust you. I want to do business with you. And then that's how it started.
Yeah. That's awesome. Is that still operating today? I know there were some challenges with COVID and things like that. It is?
Yeah, still, we're still operating. It's a side business now for me.
What? Right. Was that question I'd like to ask, was it surprisingly easier than you thought it would be, or harder than you thought it would be with hindsight?
Probably easier.
Easier? Yeah, it sounded like that in your description. It does seem like the solar installation business seems like a crazy business to get into, like very technical and difficult, but really it's like sales and then it's adult Legos, right? It's like putting pieces together. That's all it really is. What was the shift like, shifting your responsibilities from that business to low code, as we kind of shift in this conversation a little bit? And we'll get to defining what low code, no code is, since our listeners haven't probably heard of it yet at this point. But obviously you shifted from that business to a new business. I'm not guessing. I think in past conversations we talked about that it was because the solar panel industry took a hit for a time period and you were already kind of working on this. Am I getting that right? Or what's the story behind that shift?
Yeah, actually the solar panel installation business has pretty decent margins. So we were not selling a lot of volume, but high ticket installations. So it was like, making a proposal will take you a couple hours, right? And then now that I had a small team, they were installing and I was doing nothing. So I was at home, like just, chilling. And that's when I started into these no code and low code things. So yeah, during COVID and the new Mexican government, who's very anti renewable energies, there was a little bit of a problem, but now that things are getting back to normal, it's not a great business, but it's okay.
So you had, I guess I didn't understand this. You had headwinds, regulatory wise with solar. Like they weren't necessarily pro solar, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that will probably affect larger installations, commercial installations, or companies that are actually selling energy back to the grid. When you look at a home that has 8 kilowatts installed or something like that, it really shouldn't matter. And hopefully they won't get to that level of detail and have homeowners buy batteries or something. I don't think we'll go there yet. Okay.
Interesting. So shifting to low code, your company now, the no code and low code revolution's here. I've seen it. It's an extremely different approach that businesses can take in developing software. And so as we shift to discussing your business here, I think it's important we define what your business is and why it is so different from other software developers. So in your words, can you give our listeners a digestible understanding of what low code software development is?
Sure. So I think previously when you were developing software, building software, you were writing lines of code, right? There are multiple languages which you can use to write code, and at the end you produce an app or a software or whatever. Nowadays, there are tools that are like a drag and drop interface. They might be a little bit more complicated than that, but it's like a drag and drop interface where you can use certain elements to build something, to build an app or build software, right? So it's like if you buy a piece of land, you can build your own house by cutting wood and then making whatever, right? You can make your home from scratch, or you can just go to IKEA and buy a piece of furniture, a chair or a desk or something, right? You still have to assemble the chair. You still have to assemble the desk. And imagine that there were multiple ways to get to that point. You could choose a white countertop or a wooden countertop, whatever, right? But it's like this way of building visually and not with lines of code. That means that you end up developing software usually 10 times faster and 10 times cheaper than traditionally with lines of code.
That's one of the best analogies, the building of the home that I've heard for this space. I actually, you went different. You went IKEA, but I was thinking of a similar analogy, which is like you can have your home built from pieces of wood, cutting each piece as you build it, or the big new thing is prefabricated homes, like high-end prefabricated homes, right? Where piece by piece, so one wall comes, another wall is already built, comes, you set it in place. Kind of seems similar to that too, right? Where it's like you're building this structure with pieces that have already been pre-built for you, which is I hadn't thought about that, and it actually helps me as I'm thinking through some of the things we do from that low code side. So pivoting to that, then how does a company like yours approach the initial development with a prospective client differently than a traditional developer would? Or is it different? I don't know.
I think so. It depends. We have two types of clients. One type of client is a company like yours. So you have a team of, 20 people maybe. It's growing and you need to automate certain things, right? You have to make things work better, faster, less error prone, right? So with those type of clients, we have to understand how the data flows. We have to understand their processes. We have to learn how their business works and see where are the areas that these low-code and no-code tools can help them optimize their processes. And then there's other type of client who is an entrepreneur who has an idea and they want to validate if their idea makes sense or not, if they can get feedback, if they can get users, if they can get people pay for their app service, whatever, right? And then with them, it's about building a very basic MVP, or sometimes less basic, building an MVP and having them validate their idea quickly, and then iterating to define their product better.
Interesting. So you kind of have those two types of clients. How are you? What's the business development technique? I mean, obviously, you guys are all over digital media and things like that. But when you're finding these businesses, what's the method that people are either finding you or you're finding them? Because I'll give an example of myself. I'm a tech nerd a bit, and I first try the things, and then when I break it or it doesn't work, I call up Jesus and I say, hey, help me fix this and do this correctly, right? So that I'm one type of client. And then there's the other type who probably has zero acumen when it comes to building anything digitally, right? So I'm guessing they fall in those two camps. How exactly do they find you typically? Or do you find them? Or how are you approaching it? Because I think the thread I'm trying to pull here is that I feel like it's a very different approach, and I could be wrong. I love being wrong. It's a very different approach from how some of my true software developer friends, like where, think old school software development, how they approach generally larger sized businesses, I would think, for building their software. So I don't even know if there's a good question in there, but if you could pull that a little bit.
In our case, it's complicated. And I really enjoy selling. I'm better at selling that than building apps or automating things. So I've tried a lot of different things, right? And we can think of two things. One is that this no-code and low-code environment or new way of building software is a wave that is rising very quickly. So a lot of people find about these tools, about this way of making things, and they're like, I need to find someone who can help me get to this point or build this thing, right? So they dive into the no-code and low-code world and they find us, right? Social media, blogs, podcasts, Google, whatever. We're partners with a bunch of different tools, so maybe they find us through them. And then there's this other type of client that we're doing cold email outreach. So we've figured out certain verticals, certain industries that need a lot of help, right? And they need a lot of they've always needed a lot of technical help, but either it has been too expensive for them or they're very non-technical, right? So imagine a doctor. So healthcare is a very good industry and the legal world, right? Especially, and probably these two type of business owners are very far away from technology. It's hard for them to explain something, and it's hard for a traditional developer to understand what they need and find a match and build something that makes sense for them, right? So I think that we're very good there, like really understanding as a business owner what your needs are and translating that into a digital product that actually helps you at a good price.
Oh my gosh, that's the hard, that to me is the hardest part of this. And that's where I always got stuck. And I bet you probably felt this from me, which is in my mind, I had a thought of how something needed to work. And I felt like trying to explain it to somebody who didn't understand sort of running a business in general, that was going to be far more difficult. And that's what I found with you guys, which was you've already ran businesses before. So you knew sort of the need that we were looking for, not necessarily in our space, but in the space of running a business in general. So, touching on that a little bit, because I like what you said about a wave. Like you hear about low code and no code tools and development all over the place now. So it's quite the big wave you're surfing right now. But I think for business owners, it's hard with everything on their plate and being able to, think or imagine what sort of software they need. Sometimes it's hard for them to even start there. So how do you advise your clients, our listeners, to sort of, what's the first step to getting their creative juices flowing when they're trying to imagine how they might automate something in their business or implement something like this? I
think that if it's a business that it's already running and working, they already have something, right? Usually it's not the best. Like we all use software that we're not extremely happy about it, but that's what it's out there, right? So, and there's always like certain gaps for the different software tools that you use that you end up losing that flow of the data, right? So you have your QuickBooks, and then you have to export that into a Google Sheet or an Excel file to do something else, and then connect it back to your bank, for example. That's a very typical use case, right? So when you find these gaps of information, especially when you have a growing team, with a bunch of people coming to that Google Sheet or that spreadsheet and editing data, deleting data, and then you lose visibility of what's happening. Right? If you have 5 people coming to the same spreadsheet, editing the data and deleting the data, it probably will become very messy, right? So we usually try to find those little gaps, and we can start automating from there. There are other types of clients who are like, I have no idea. I want a system. But those are very complicated clients because they don't really know the way they want to work. Because with technology, you can do everything, right? As long as you have clarity of what you want to do. Because the worst thing possible is I'm starting a new business and I want my own custom CRM. Cool. What's it supposed to do? Like, what's the logic behind the CRM, right? I don't know. There are 27,000 CRMs out there. Try one or try 2 or 3 or whatever, and then choose one, and then choose one that fixes 80% of your pains. And then the rest 20% of your pains will fix them with a different tool, but be connected. Because these no code and low code tools, what they allow you to do is connect different softwares, even though they don't talk to each other. There are tools that allow you to connect things between each other, and then your software talks to the other software. You automate a lot of things, and you start saving time and money. Right.
Yeah. See, it's funny because I thought you were going to say that the clients who don't know what they want, that they just know they need something. I thought that was going to be an easier client for you. But it's interesting that you say it's more complicated. And now I understand that you're having to create not only the software, but like the workflow, how their business works, which is sort of their job.
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
what I mean? Like that's something they're supposed to have thought through. Yeah. And I think I see it all the time, in conversations I have where people just, for whatever reason, haven't taken a moment to think through why do we do things the way we do them. And I tell my team that all the time, like, just because we've done this for the last 16 years or the last 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, doesn't mean it's still the way we need to be doing this. So why do we do it? What are we accomplishing? What are we protecting? What are we, those kind of things with all of our workflows? And one of the things I tell my team, because we're always trying to automate. You've seen that a bunch, obviously, sometimes to a fault, but I tell people to start with, what is the thing you dislike the most doing at work? What's the thing you hate the most? What's the most tedious, annoying, frustrating thing to do at your job? Whether it's your job, whether you're the owner of the company, founder, whatever, what is that thing? 90% of the time, that thing can be fixed with some sort of low code or no code solution. Like usually those are the lowest hanging fruit for these automations. At least I found that. Is it similar for you as you've seen other businesses?
It's completely true. However, something that I've seen, and we've talked about it as well, is that it's usually the business owner. Like your employees won't tell you that. And we've seen that with multiple business owners. It's always them. I have a few clients that we have a call every other month, right? And just talk, and they tell me about like how their business is going. Oh, I have this problem because this person added a number wrong. And I start now pulling the line, right? Where, we have a system and then there's this piece of paper and they put this piece of paper, they scan it, and then they copy this number into an Excel file. Like, dude, okay, hang on, let's dig in deeper here. And then we find something that we can automate, right? But it's always the owner who's the person who's really interested in automating these things. Because at the end, he's the one paying for it. Yeah. And he's the one feeling the pain if the work wasn't done the way he wanted. Right. So
I think there's also a bit of an identity thing too, though. Like what I found when I asked my team, and we talked about this a little bit on your podcast, but what I find is I'm always trying to drive the company forward as the founder, like whatever that means. Like I want to drive the company forward. Whereas I think subconsciously, as employees of company, our identities are tied up in our roles at the company. And if all of a sudden you're automating some of those identities, some of those things you do, well, then what's left, right? And I think what people need to understand is you're only taking out the stuff that isn't worth doing anyway, or isn't worth a human doing, right? It only unlocks more potential, more opportunity for all of those employees. So yeah, appreciate that. So on your industry, like I said, is blowing up and you're a leader in it. We all can see that, whether you're on LinkedIn, Twitter, your podcast, everything. And I'm sure there's a ton of new entrants. What is something for the benefit of your space? What do you wish your colleagues and competitors would stop doing?
I think there's a perception that since now you can do a lot for a lot less money, that no code and low code should be inexpensive, right? Because at the end, your solution, if you're comparing $150,000 MVP compared to a $10,000 MVP, it's a lot of money, right? But that doesn't mean that the development hour, that the agency hour, that the freelancer hour is less valuable, right? And I'm a little bit worried about the industry, that as more people come in and become experts in different no-code tools, the price goes down so much as it went down with web design, for example. Like with a website, you can get a website on Fiverr for $5 probably. So at the end, there's always an agency that charges $150,000 for a website, right? But I hope that we understand that
I've seen
the customer is already benefiting from the price of the tool itself. Don't drive the price of the development hour down. So that's something that I'm a little bit concerned about. I think that we started very early. Yeah. And we will be able to maintain and increase our prices because we were very good. We have a lot of experience. But overall, I just hope that the industry overall thinks about that. You're building, you're giving your client a value already. So don't underprice your job.
I agree. I mean, it's so funny how many businesses are a race to the bottom, even in our space, right? So people just assume the cost of the capital is the only thing that matters, right? It's not the relationship. It's not what happens when things are tough. It's not what the experience will be like. And I think the same thing applies to your business, right? Like, sure, somebody could do it for $10 an hour, but that experience is going to be a lot different. Yeah. The end output is going to be a lot different. And what you said was very interesting that I don't think people are thinking through is that if you get to the same outcome with a $10,000 product versus a $150,000 product, I would argue the developer's hour, the developer time is more valuable on the $10,000 one, because you just created something that should cost $150,000, and now you can create 10 of those items for one, right? Mm-hmm. So like that development hour should be more expensive. But clearly you're a leader in the industry, so you can help advise people, and you're out there talking to everybody and speaking at conferences and speaking on podcasts. So I hope that's the case for you in your industry. So a couple last things here. We all love our clients, our babies, all these things. But if you had to choose, what's the most interesting or favorite app your team has built? And you can't say mine.
We have built a few very cool ones. We built one that is actually a SaaS, a software as a service, that allows you to send a fax. You know how doctors still want things in fax, right? Because of HIPAA. So we built these, it's called faxbydoc.app. This web app that allows you to pay a subscription, which is the cheapest in the market, that allows you to add your providers, your doctors, and send them faxes from your phone for the cheapest price ever. That's a cool one. And then we have a couple other ones, which are under NDA, but so I can't say what we did, but we did something very complicated or complex, which is we run Python code in a Glide app, right? So because a lot of people in the space or who learn about no code and low code, they're like, no code is very limiting. There are so many limitations and so many constraints when you're building these type of tools. So we've built a couple apps that actually run Python, which is a very complex programming language, right? So those ones are very interesting because it really has allowed us to see the power of no code. Now things can really actually scale for a fraction of the time and cost of what traditionally people have been paying for.
Right. I mean, that's one of the questions I had for you was, where does low code reach its limits? Are there any? And it sounds like you're unlocking new ways where
I think these tools are getting much.
Here's where a limit was.
Exactly. Something that we've seen is a lot of clients are like, what happens when I hit this limitation with this tool that you're proposing? And what we've seen is that the tools move way faster than the clients. So when the client gets to that point, the tool is already much better or much more robust. And what we're also seeing with some other apps that we're building is that the building interface, the developing interface is visual, but on the back end is actually producing lines of code. So you're getting the same output as traditional development, but the visual environment, the building environment is visual. So that is like a different type of project, much more expensive, $30,000 to $50,000 compared to $250, $500 plus projects. So I think the industry, the no code and low code,
you're still talking about a quarter of the cost.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like you're talking real development for a quarter of the cost because of these things that have been developed. It really is unlocking so many opportunities for so many businesses.
Yeah, we're building an app that will be native app in the App Store, can handle millions of records, millions of clients for $40,000, right? So
wow.
Yeah.
Pretty incredible. All right. So we're going to, thanks for the time. We're going to get to our final questions. I call it the fast four. So we won't spend a ton of time on each one of these. Give me your quickest answer off the top of your head, that you think of. So other than what you're doing right now or what you've done in the past, what other profession or business would you like to take a stab at?
I think there's still a lot of opportunity in content marketing, like creating good content online.
Interesting.
Is very valuable and can drive traffic and money to brands. So that's something that I like, content. Yeah.
Well, you're doing a good job of it already for low code, so I imagine you'll do a good job when you take a stab at it. Next, what's something you're terrible at? I'm terrible at being on time. What are you terrible at?
I'm terrible at painting, at graphics. I'm not good at drawing and those kind of things. We have a couple great designers, it makes a huge difference. My designs and these professional guys.
It's a massive difference. Yes. Massive difference. All right, next, what book are you reading right now?
I just finished a very good book about the Mongolian chief, the Khan.
Genghis Khan.
Yeah, great book. Yeah. We have always heard or learned about him as a violent man that came from the north, from North China and Mongolia and all that. And it provides a very different way of looking at him, how he really created commerce. And he was the leader of the largest empire of the world at their time. Great book. I think it's called The History of Genghis Khan or something like that.
Well, history. I think I heard that because it was on some sort of site. I was looking at some sort of like Amazon or something really of that effect. Interesting. I just read one on, like characters like that. I find really interesting because history has told a story and all that. So I just read one myself on Robert E. Lee. Hopefully I don't get canceled for saying I read a book about Robert E. Lee, but it was just fascinating to see history and how it repeats itself, and that we always don't get the full story of things. So I love the biographies like that for sure. Okay. And lastly, what's the last thing? And if you have to check your phone, you can. What's the last thing you listen to on Spotify or Apple Music?
Dude, I'm very disappointed to say this, but probably Baby Shark. I have a 1-year-old. He listens to Baby Shark all the time. He now knows how to use the phone. He's 1 year and 8 months. He finds the Spotify icon, puts his stupid Baby Shark. So Baby Shark.
Just wait. You're going to start getting into the remixes of Baby Shark. I'm into the remixes, with my kids.
It's terrible. I know.
Okay. Yeah. You got to get into those remixes. Cool. Well, thanks for your time, Jesus. We really appreciate it. You're a good friend and colleague. Thanks for being my first recording here. It's been super fun and educational, and I learned some things that I didn't already know about you from our other conversations. So where can people find you online and get in touch?
They can find us on our website. It's lowcode.agency.
Lowcode.agency. And you're also on Twitter, right?
I'm also on Twitter. Very active. It's a very complicated handle in English. It's ELTINTERO. So
what is it? What does it mean in English?
LowCode Agency, and I'll show up there.
We're gonna link to all this stuff anyway. Jesus will share all the different places, and we'll put it in the show notes. So awesome. Well, appreciate your time and have an awesome weekend.
Thanks, Ryan. Thank you for your time.
Take care, bud. Bye bye.